Welcome to the Oxygen Advantage podcast with your hosts, Oxygen Advantage founder Patrick McKeown and Daniel Paulson. With the Oxygen Advantage podcast, we aim to show how functional breathing is an essential part of a healthy and well-balanced lifestyle. Each episode, we meet experts in their field from around the world and talk about their lives, their experiences, and how they learned the importance of breathing. Join us and get inspired. Get the Oxygen Advantage.
So, conversation all about breathing orthodontics. Where is it going? Where has it come from? And I'm delighted to be accompanied with Dr. John Mew and Dr. Mike Mew. I've had the privilege of visiting their clinic in Purley, and it's going back as far as 2009. And they were very graceful in terms of allowing me to sit in to observe them both working with their patients. And the reason that both doctors were interested was because about 40 or 50 years ago, Dr. John Mew was one of the first orthodontists to start talking about the importance of breathing in and out through the nose, good posture with the tongue against the palate. So it's a privilege. And John, I would love just to get your insight in terms of your initial you were working as a dentist. Your father was a dentist as well. There's a lot of history here in the dental world. You then trained as an orthodontist. You were also working in orthodontic surgery, observing, and you were seeing things that it asked you had some questions.
I think I was very lucky. My father was actually an orthodontist, although they didn't call themselves that in those days. But he treated other people's patients, which I think makes him an orthodontist. But it was he who taught me the value of expansion. And that really set me off down the road, because after he died, I looked at his study models. He kept good records. And I found that I'd been taught never expand, it always relapses. And I found, looking at my father's cases, yes, the majority of them had relapse. Not all the way, but part of the way. But some of them hadn't really relapsed very much. But what really surprised me was the fact that a few of them had actually gone on widening after he'd expanded them. Now, you can imagine that blew my mind. And it was he who taught me there is a reason for everything. So I simply said, I must find the reason why some people's maxillae go on widening and some don't. And then I realized it was the position of the tongue, and that set everything off.
Can I just draw this just for the person who's listening in? Because when you're talking about expansion, you're talking about the maxilla, which is the top jaw. And the tongue, if we were to look at the shape of the tongue is quite U-shaped. And what you're saying is that by having the mouth closed, especially during the early years of development in children, if the mouth is closed and if the tongue is resting up in the roof of the mouth, this will help to ensure forward growth of the maxilla and also width of the maxilla. And the benefit of this is it influences the face, but you're also not going to have overcrowding of teeth. Now, I will talk about my own personal basis. I was a mouth breather for the first 25 years. I'm not sure when I started mouth breathing, but I assume from my early photographs it was quite young. My maxilla had a very narrow V-shaped maxilla and a high palate, which was infringing my nasal cavity. And when I smiled, I had black triangles either side because my mouth wasn't big enough, my jaw wasn't big enough for the mouth. So what your father was
I'm on a Zoom call at the moment. Phone later. Sorry, Patrick.
You're all right. What your father was talking about was expansion. And when you then looked at your father's work, you've seen that some of them relapsed, so they went back in. And why might they go back in? What is causing the after expansion? What causes then the maxilla to go inwards again?
It took me a long time to realize that, Patrick. But if a baby is spoon-fed or cup-fed or really just not breastfed, they tend, when they swallow, to suck. Whereas if a baby is breastfed, certainly to full term, they learn to push with their tongue against the breast to crush the breast and squeeze the milk out. Therefore, they subsequently swallow in an entirely different way. Every time they swallow, they push on their palate. They don't suck. And that causes a lot of difference, not just to the width of the maxilla, but also it will cause enlargement of the buccinator muscles, which always looks unattractive.
So in
Except
terms
for young people.
Say that, Mike.
Except if you're under about 8 years old, and large buccinator muscles can look very cute.
Yes, that's very true. It's part of the sign of an attractive baby, chubby cheeks.
Yeah, because they've got good effective buccinators, so they're clearly breastfeeding very well. But cherubs and sucking infants are the only people who should be using their buccinator muscles. And when you stop breastfeeding, you should then move to an adult swallow, which is different from an infantile suckle or breastfeeding. And then your cheek muscles should hollow out. So I've got very little buccinator. But strange enough, my buccinators, even when I went to university, were still too big. And I then worked out what Dad was so I worked it out. I could deduce that my large buccinators from the way I was swallowing. And I made a purposeful effort not to use my buccinators, and they've virtually disappeared. So I have much hollower cheek here because I have no buccinator left. And that was just focus and dedication, just like Yatego breathing.
And in terms of the development of your face, because even as we look at it now, viewers will see that your face is much broader than mine is. And we can deduce from that there's...
Yours has got broader.
Mine has got broader, of course. It was
and
more
no,
narrower.
It's interesting, yes. Patrick, because it's the first time we've chatted on the phone, but first time we've spoken properly since COVID.
That's true.
You know?
Yes,
Patrick,
yes.
I have asked you before, I would love to have a really good picture of you with a 6-inch ruler held vertically in front of your nose, because we have at the practice a picture of you taken about, 5, 6, maybe more years ago.
Yes.
And you are noticeably different now. And I'm sure that is because you have corrected your training. And it would be excellent for you to be able to demonstrate that.
Yes, yes.
You know, and you've worked hard, Patrick, I can see.
Well, one thing that I was working on was having correct tongue resting posture. And also doing some of the exercises, tongue pops, and the different exercise in terms of from myofunctional therapy. And I do believe that my lower jaw has actually came forward. And this is often a question that people ask, especially adults, say you have a 20-year-old child, and it's a very delicate answer to give them that if, for example, they have jaws that were set back such as mine were, which compromises the airway, it can set you up with the risk of sleep apnea for life. Can that be improved without orthodontic intervention? Or is it too delicate a thing to say that we can't always say it in all instances, but can we influence the growth of the jaws? And in some ways, it seems that we can.
My research shows quite definitely that the moment you put bands and brackets on teeth, the jaw retrudes. All right, maybe just 1 or 2 millimeters, but sometimes 10 or 15.
So yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, sorry. I mean, so there's an intervention can at times, and I'm not saying it always is, okay, but suggesting that sometimes trying to intervene to align the teeth may cause the face to drop down a little. Yeah.
Well, I've seen it firsthand with my own daughter, Lauren, because a hard wire has been put on her. And as soon as the hard wire was put on her, the gummy smile became evident. And now we're taking away the hard wire. So she's got train tracks on. So something happened to drop the maxilla to show the gummy smile. Now, maybe a lot of parents wouldn't necessarily be observant of this.
Yeah.
And I think this is why parents need to be aware of information. Now, I'm going to come back full circle. Mouth
Can I
breathing.
quickly put a plug here, Patrick? It's really
Yes.
nice that we've got some photographs from a while ago of you. Parents, take good photographs. Take great records. If you're worried about this, if you have any concerns, simply take good photographs. Good sideways photographs, preferably with a telephoto lens that's zoomed in. So the longer the distance, the better, takes out parallax. And with good lighting, I say always good artificial lighting, because then it's the same each time. Anyway, sorry.
And a blank background.
But preferably a neutral background, preferably white.
White wall or something.
Mm.
And by the parents taking this, then they can follow the progression of their child's orthodontic intervention to see if there's changes to the shape of the face. Is that
Yes.
what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's more. I mean, just to understand, not only just if you're going to try any intervention. So you're going to try, and sometimes, I don't want to knock orthodontics too much.
Sure,
Sometimes orthodontists can get a fantastic outcome. I've seen it frequently. That they can even sometimes, I've seen faces, a little bit of expansion. Someone gets their tongue up there. They change for the better. I've seen some really beautiful facial outcomes with conventional orthodontics. But either ways, if there's this controversy that you can hear there is, take good records. And even if you're not going to do orthodontics, you're going to do something like mewing, something like Buteyko breathing, something like the mealtime exercise, or just try and encourage your child to stand up straight and shut their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Then what you need to know is if it was doing anything. Is it working? Is it not working? Take good records.
Picture tells the story.
Yeah.
Coming back to mouth breathing and the importance of correct tongue resting posture, and I might just put this out to the two of you. I was preparing or thinking, I knew, of course, I was going to be chatting with you today, and I went in on PubMed yesterday, and I did a simple search, and this can be a search that can be done by any parents, is just to go in on PubMed. And PubMed is the database of pretty much most papers, clinical trials, etc. And I'm just going to do it now, and I'll share it. So when I went in there, I put in two words. I put in mouth breathing, and I put in malocclusion. And it revealed it was something like 700. Okay, I've got 563 results here. I started going through these results, and I couldn't find papers without a connection that when the child had the mouth open, their teeth were crooked. Now, any parent can check this out for themselves with such an array, and you can see where I was checking, and all I was doing was just randomly clicking on articles, okay, and then looking, and pretty much I would say the vast majority of papers, it was shown if there's a problem with swallowing, there's a problem with tongue thrust, if there's a problem with nasal breathing, that it had a negative effect on the development of the face. Now, this information is not new. I remember reading an article that was published back in 1909 in the journal Dental Cosmos.
Yeah.
And it talked about the child with the mouth open in school, the teachers accusing the child of being inattentive, the child's face looks dull and expressionless, and yet this has been debated in orthodontist. My question, as a lay person looking in, I'm not a dentist, I'm not an orthodontist, I work with simple breathing. How has this been overlooked? And this is not a criticism, this is only a question that I would like to put out there. I was that mouth breathing child. 25 to 50% of studied children are persistently mouth breathing, either during wakefulness or sleep. I have never come across any paper that hasn't said that mouth breathing has some negative impact in the development of that child. Why is it being ignored?
I think I can answer that, Patrick. Individuals believe what they believe. They will not change that because there is evidence. You can produce paper after paper all saying the same thing, and nobody will change their mind unless they have to. Young students, yes, will grow up with a different message, but people who practice for 20 or 30 years are not going to change because someone writes a paper. In my opinion, the only way you will get change is if people are made to change. That is why I think that the law is possibly the only way that it will happen. Now, my colleagues disagree and think that's a terrible approach. I can see Michael's face. He doesn't approve of that at all. But I'm quite sure that if you want to change something, you have to make it illegal.
But sorry, to come, I think it's very true. If parents were aware of this and they selected this and they were willing to pay at times more for this because these types of treatments are longer duration and they require getting someone to change, and that was the big thing. But I think another thing is that people have tried in studies to get children to change, go from mouth breathing to nose breathing. They've tried to do many things, and it's really quite a difficult thing to do.
Yes.
And this is the problem that, I can be an orthodontist and I can have a great practice where I employ some assistants to do most of the work for me. I have a treatment plan, so I treatment plan the patients coming through, and we have 3 or 4 different types of treatment. Everyone else understands the protocols, and this whole system runs like a machine.
Yes.
And it's no stress. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, door closes, you go home, there's no stress, there's no worry. You make really good money. I mean, really good money doing this. And you make people's teeth straight. That's what we do in modern medicine. Doctor, here's some money. I want you to make my teeth straight for me. I want that product. And here you have a very successful business trying to change swallowing, breathing, posture. Well, that's hard work. That's difficult. I don't go home. I don't clock off in the evening and go home. I'm on call all the time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to change
But
people.
Mike, I understand it is difficult. And I work with breathing with kids. It doesn't mean it should be ignored. It has been
No. Yeah.
It has been completely ignored. How many dentists, if I went into my local city in Galway here and I went to an orthodontic practice, and I have asked dentists here, and I've asked them the simple question, does mouth breathing affect the development of the face? And the answer typically said back to me is no. So in other words, if a child goes in with their mouth open, and even to their local dentist, surely when we're thinking about oral health, it's not enough to be avoiding or minimizing sweet intake or brushing teeth. We should also be talking about the importance of nose breathing, because nose breathing ensures that there's healthy saliva or more saliva in the mouth, which is anti-plaque. So here is the fundamental question. Yes, it is challenging, but what is the alternative? If we ignore this, and if parents ignore this, well, I don't think parents would ignore it if they knew the effect. That is the problem. The information isn't put out there. And I would also say that there would be a drive to encourage nasal breathing if society got behind it. If the school teacher was encouraging the children in class, if the parents were encouraging, if the pediatric dentist, if the doctor, if all of the healthcare professions, then it would be normal. And then it would be abnormal, the child going around with the mouth open. And we have to think of the bigger consequences of this. Karen Bonnock did a study in Stratford-upon-Avon. She published it in the Journal of Pediatrics in 2012. She looked at mouth breathing and sleep disorder breathing in children. She studied 11,000 children from the ages of 6 months to the age of 57 months. And children with sleep disorder breathing, if untreated, had a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. I'm going to pull up this paper here. Now, she talked about mouth breathing as the hallmark symptoms. Now, when we're talking about craniofacial development and obstructive sleep apnea, so here is this paper here, 11,000 children. and a history of sleep disorder breathing through the age of 5 years of age, a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. Now, she goes on to say that she talks that pediatric sleep disorders result in disrupted, inefficient, and inadequate sleep. Both may affect brain development and cause neuronal damage, particularly during critical early developmental periods. She talks about 3 million children in the United States, aged between 6 and 21 years of age, who were receiving special education for conditions associated with sleep disorders. And then she asks, what are the classic hallmark symptoms of sleep disorders? The multidimensional expression of sleep disorder hallmark symptoms: snoring, apnea, and mouth breathing. Well, if the airway is compromised, is that child not going to snore?
I'm sure that paper has been repeated dozens of times.
No. That's a pivotal paper. Karen Bonnet does some really good work, but it's like she's speaking, but no one's listening to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the thing that is mind-boggling for me as the person, and I've often said it, looking into your industry, the dental industry. Highly educated people. I know what it takes to get into university, to get through university, and to get a dental degree is at a different level. And how come?
Dentistry, you're at the top level. You're at the top level.
Top.
So if you're a dentist and you want to get into orthodontics, you've got to be the top level.
Totally.
And then these are really, really tough qualifications.
Parents, any parent listening to this is going to get it. And any parent listening to this, what I would say to parents is, when you're going around your day-to-day activities, you're going into a restaurant, look at the facial profile of the kids with the mouth breathing.
I want to point out here that, when we're talking about mouth breathing, remember, we try and look at the specific angles of this, and we're saying a open mouth posture and low tongue posture, okay? Because those are the elements of mouth breathing which we think are harmful. So if you're watching this, be aware that this is, we're going to use these terms, we're going to flick around these terms. We've got mouth breathing, and that's an overall sort of description. It's much more a lay person's description. When we're talking technically, we're going to be talking about an open mouth posture of the lips and a low tongue position. Because, of course, if you're going to mouth breathe, you have to have a low tongue posture. You have to have separated lips. That's the hallmark of mouth breathing. But, and there's one interesting point here, Patrick, that I do need to think needs highlighting, is that you can breathe through your nose with your tongue low and your lips apart. Yes. So that's why sometimes it's important to think about the medical terms or the medical sides, because sometimes a slightly better description. But of course, we all know what mouth breathing is, and it helps people to understand, particularly the lay public.
Yes. The debate that may be here is that the child was born with a high upper palate. Now, for example, I'll give you the case of myself. My parents, broad facial structures. All of the siblings, narrow facial structures. My daughter has ptuitogenesis, missing one incisor, which is relevant or prevalent in 10% of the population, the study population.
Go back
modern
in the past.
Population.
Go back in those ancestral groups. Basically, the number of missing teeth is virtually zero.
So even if it was a genetic influence, and of course the environment, we're talking about epigenetics here.
Yes, perfectly.
The recognition that this child has a small mouth, which there's not enough room for the tongue, which is going to likely encroach the airway, the dentist is still in a position to do something about it.
Yeah.
So whether it's the genes which have caused the narrow maxilla and the overcrowding, or whether it's the mouth breathing. So is it the genetics that cause mouth breathing, in other words, or is it mouth breathing which has caused the alteration to the shape of the face? The dentist is still able to in a position to expand that palate to make enough room for the tongue. So it really does come down to, it's not just about straightening the teeth, it's really about the child's airway is what we should be focusing on. And that's what you've been focusing on.
Yeah. May I say something here?
Okay. Yes.
Because the points you're raising, Patrick, have worried me for a long time. Because I'm saying without any doubt that the width of the palate is due and cured by the position of the tongue. And yet, there is no doubt that this can, children can have narrow palates at birth. Right. I know that the tongue is actually posturing during development, and maybe some children have poor tongue posture in the womb. That could explain it, but in many ways that weakens my own hypothesis. And I think that one should be able to answer that, and I really can't.
No. Yep.
But regardless of the hypothesis, we are still, the whole debate is all about the chicken and the egg. So, for example, there's questions. How long should the child have the mouth open before it's clinically relevant or it has a negative impact on the growth of the jaws? How much nasal obstruction is relevant? None of these are absolutely irrelevant. If the child has the mouth open, and the problem with this is how do we measure it? It comes back to, why do we need to have it absolutely measured in science when common sense should be the logic here? Common sense should be the approach. If the child is having the mouth open, the tongue isn't able to rest in the roof of the mouth, and if the tongue is considered to be an orthodontic appliance, or at least to provide support for the maxilla.
The ultimate orthodontic appliance. That is, the only perfect orthodontic appliance is the tongue. Once professions go in a certain direction, it can be hard to change the direction because you have this structure. People are taught methods of straightening teeth. Well, if you've been taught methods of straightening teeth, then that's what you do. And if that's what your career now is predicated upon, if you're to buy into the alternative viewpoint, would weaken your own.
Yes.
It weakens what you're taught. It's your sense of identity. You become an orthodontist. You become a tooth straightener. That's your identity. To suggest maybe we should be doing, what I'm saying is prevention, and that's when you start to understand. So, Patrick, we were talking about the Black Swan article I produced. So I went on a 5-6 year letter writing campaign to try to get a debate on why teeth are crooked. My speciality, the orthodontists, openly admit that they don't know the cause of the problem. That might surprise people, but we take the best textbooks in the world are suggesting that we don't know more than 5% of the cases, and syndromes and genetic reasons account for less than 1% of that. Most of that 5% that's understood are your thumb suckers, your tongue thrusters, the really obvious ones. And the rest of them, no one's got a clue. Well, most speciality doesn't have a clue. So I thought sensibly, we're treating a concept without knowing the cause of the problem. Let's have a debate on this.
Yeah.
Let's have a debate on why are teeth crooked. So if you scroll to the very bottom of that article, Patrick, scroll to the very bottom, the last paragraph is here. So it says, I challenge the orthodontic profession to a debate to test the hypothesis that malocclusion is caused by the environment and modified by the genes. If this is upheld, then an independent investigation on the theory of orthotropics should ensue. Because, this concept we come out with, so whereas we talk about orthodontics is orthos, correct or straight teeth, orthotropics is orthos or correct growth. So effectively, I'm saying rather than straightening the teeth, if we get the face growing very well, then the teeth should be naturally straight within the better developed face.
Yes.
If we go one step back, and this gets emotive when we talk about faces, but people with great facial form, the best facial architecture, tend to have straight teeth, broad smiles, and space for all of their teeth. People whose facial architecture, well, what do we say? This is emotive. Didn't grow as well. They tend to have crooked teeth and less space for all of their teeth. Now, conventional wisdom is growth is largely genetic. What you're going to do is straighten the teeth in the space you've got. And orthodontists are generally brilliant at doing that.
Yes.
I know, this is my profession. Hats off to them. they're brilliant at arranging the teeth within the given structure that someone has grown to. Well, we're saying, well, we could go beyond that. We could try to change the very structure, the very growth of the structure, so that you gain good architecture and naturally straight teeth. You don't need retention. In fact, I don't even use fixed appliances to make teeth straight because, I don't want to force teeth into position. I want the individual to align their own teeth. They may not do quite such a good job, but it's likely to be more stable.
Plus, the
less likely to cause damage.
And the resultant shape to the face. I'm just going to put up, can be replicated by any parent as well watching in.
Yeah.
Go into Google and put in adenoid faces. Now, how many times have we seen these faces? And again, when I look at, for example, this boy here, his nose seems quite large. His maxilla is set back. His mandible is very set back. So already then you have to ask the question on his airway. The question here to ask is, will these children have straight teeth or will they have overcrowding of teeth in all likelihood?
Yeah, I mean, in all likelihood, but it goes beyond that, Patrick.
Yeah.
Because, well, when we're looking at the adenoidal face.
Yes.
Well, there's a great crossover with the village idiot. Okay.
Yes.
Now, again, this is emotive stuff, but when we start looking at what Karen Bonnet was just saying about mental effects of snoring and mouth breathing, and then where we think the village idiot, who looks just like adenoidal faces, these are just those guys that Karen Bonnet's talking about who's lack good neurological development because, well, they're the village idiot, aren't they?
Yeah.
And these are big things because we've gone here from talking about crooked teeth and facial aesthetics and these things that a lot of people could write off as being
not linked.
Just aesthetics, just looking pretty. Now we're moving into sleep apnea, neural development, and of course, I had a chat with a senior ENT otolaryngology surgeon about 18 months ago in North London, and I said I thought about 10% of the British population, that could be drawn from most westernized population. But I said 10% of the British population were going to be dying about 10 years younger because of sleep apnea and its consequences. And he went, why? More like 20. And that's a 1 in 5. And remember, I qualified in 93 for dentistry in my undergraduate. And sleep apnea wasn't in the syllabus. So it's gone from not being in the syllabus in 93, for a dentist qualifying in 93, to killing 20% of the population 10 years early. Now, wow, so I qualified in 93, next year's 2003, that's 30 years.
Yeah, but
hello, well, wake up. Smell the coffee on this. What hell is going on?
There's another aspect here as well where I think the dental has a fundamental role to play, Mike. I'm a middle-aged man. I don't go to my doctor very often. In actual fact, I went to my doctor about 2 weeks ago, and the last time I was at my medical doctor was in 2012. I don't think I'm unique, okay? I could have had all of the classic hallmark symptoms, which I do for sleep apnea. But I'm not going to my medical doctor, so I'm not going to get that diagnosis. 90% of the population, according to studies in the United States, are undiagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea. 90%. Only 10% are getting treated. If a dentist was trained in the evaluation and recognition of the risk factors associated with obstructive sleep apnea, because I go to my dentist every 6 months, when I'm lying in the chair, the dentist is in an ideal position to check the high palate, the scalloping of the tongues, the jaws that are set back. And this is something that the dental profession would be tremendous as an educational campaign about sleep, knowing that we know the effects.
May I make another point?
Sure.
We really need to talk a little bit about why so many people have their mouths open. Now, I have very little doubt that it's due to the fact that we live in houses. Houses are full of dust, not just a little dust, but in every particularly bedroom, the air is stuffed full of allergens, masses of them. Breathe them in and you will have allergies. Now, at the most sensitive time is soon after birth. Children are put in a bedroom full of fluff and everything else. They develop nasal rhinitis. They have runny and blocked noses. They can't breathe. All right, it tends to be spasmodic, but the important thing is that over time, they get into the habit of mouth breathing. That becomes a permanent habit, and it's because we live in houses, and the only cure is to sell your house and go and live in a cave.
You're taking the conversation a little bit off topic. Wonderful,
No,
but you're just adding things in.
no,
We're
it's the
not.
cause. The
We're
cause
getting
is
blocked
essential.
noses. We don't have to be the ones that define the causes of the blocked noses. We know it's happening, and the risk is that if you put your neck out and make comments like that, those are the comments that you will be that people trying to disprove your argument will focus on.
Maybe, but it is the truth. And one day we'll realize that.
I'm sure that holds a lot of water. Patrick, can I just come back on your comment of the dentists?
Mm.
Dentists are also uniquely positioned to take sideways facial photographs, lateral facial photographs of all of the children in their care. They can monitor the growth of the face. And I think it should be mandatory for a dentist during a checkup to take a clinical lateral facial photograph of the child's face, just to monitor what is happening. The number of times I get patients who come in to see me here, and let's say they're 12 years old. To be honest, if you're 12 years old, you're grown. If you're a 12-year-old girl, it's more or less finished.
Yeah.
But but I want to understand what's happening. So I said to them, have we got any lateral facial photographs? And they don't have one. Even this day and age where you've got so many photographs. I mean, I had about 20 photographs taken of me in my childhood.
Yeah.
Well done, Dad. My kids must pay 20,000 photographs of them. Now, sometimes what we'll resort to is taking an image from a video as they turn their head. This is just interest, just the interest's sake of what's gone wrong, how could we have predicted it, how could we have this is science. This is what I want. My mission is to get the spotlight of modern medical research to focus on this area, because we've got some ideas, we've got some interesting points. Clearly what the doctors keep turning around and they show me your evidence. What? Are you joking? No, that's not how science is supposed to work.
Yeah.
What we're supposed to do is have a chat first, use to the maximum all the evidence that's already been researched, set up some protocols on public money, because that's what it takes, and then do some research. Or if you want to do it the other way around, if you want to say, oh, show me the results of your cases, great. But can we do some comparative research? So rather than you focusing on the teeth, saying, oh, but you haven't got perfectly straight teeth, which of course I don't, because I'm not making the teeth straight. I'm asking the individual to straighten their teeth. I'm unlikely to ever get as perfectly straight teeth. It's never going to happen. So if you want to demonstrate that I can't get the teeth as straight as you can, oh, well, wonderful. What does that achieve? But if you were to add the facial before and after photographs, as well as the dental before and after, now we're in business. Now we can have we've got an open standing with Dad. When did you start challenging people to comparative research?
Oh, a long time ago. I think probably 1972.
Okay, so from 1972, because you mentioned that, I'll even write that down. So from 1972, we've been asking for comparative
50
research.
years.
50 years. 50 years. Okay.
Can we just break this?
I realise that you can
you can break
can't
this up.
measure posture, but you can see the effects of posture.
Also, what do we mean by orthodontics that's observant of the airway? Or what was the phrase you used?
Well, what I would like is that an orthodontist is not just embarking on straightening of the teeth, but also taking into consideration the airway itself. So my facial profile, for example, my forehead, and then my nose, which is crooked, my maxilla is set back, and my mandible is set back.
Yes.
And my airway is compromised.
Because of them.
I had a lot of challenges in school. I left school initially at 14 out of a total sense of frustration with the education system.
Yep.
I went back 1 year later. I did get my grades. I got into university in Dublin, and I had to work really, really hard. It could have been a lot easier.
Yep.
I want to come back just two things that are kind of niggling me a little bit. One is the facial profile here. Just to explain it to people, adenoids are lymphatic tissue at the back of the nose, which impedes airflow, and it forces the child to actually breathe through the mouth. It's not the adenoids per se which has caused this facial profile, but it's the adenoids which blocked airflow that the child wasn't able to breathe adequately through the nose. The child then switches to mouth breathing. When they switch to mouth breathing, their tongue drops. This is a medical term. And I'm not sure when was this term coined, adenoid faces or adenoid faces. But
it must be 100 years.
Oh, that was back in the early 1900s.
Yes, well, it's been around a long time. And we will see these faces around quite often. Coming back to the growth of the human face. Now, this is a paper from 1953, but I have one as 2013. And any of these papers will talk about the most critical growth period in children is typically between age 1 and 5 years of age.
Yeah.
And that's why I suppose this is something that needs to be considered in terms of if that child has a mouth breathing posture, as many of them do, early intervention is very, very important. If at the very least, to encourage the parents to be observant of their children and working with different healthcare professionals to understand and change the pattern. I'm just going to... Yeah?
Well, I'll just wait till you're finished. But
no, I'm just going to pull up this one here. This is a 2013 article. So 1953 to 2013, they were looking at 210 kids here. Or sorry, 30 subjects, 15 males, 15 females, but 210 cephs. And the size
X-rays at the side of the head.
After 5 years of age. So basically, the conclusions was that the overall linear growth changes that occurred between 6 months and 5 years of age, a span of 4.5 years, were generally greater than the changes in maxillary growth that occurred between 5 and 16 years of age, a span of 11 years. In other words, the growth of the maxilla is double the speed from age 6 months to 5 years of age as it is from 5 years of age to 16 years.
Yeah.
Most papers in terms of, but it's quite understudied, are still in agreement that the critical growth spurts in children are early on in formative years.
Yeah.
It put in very simple terms, once the incisors have erupted, it is very hard or much harder to change the pattern of growth of the face.
Yes. Patrick.
The implications of this, sorry, Mike, to cut across you. The implications of this then is that if habits have not been addressed early on, that as the child's face is growing, can we see, and has it got, does it continue to have that adverse growth in the child's face? Or in other words, a question maybe for parents, you could have a child that's 13 years of age. Should we be encouraging that 13-year-old child to start breathing through the nose with the tongue resting up in the roof of the mouth? If we don't, can it have an adverse reaction even at that age?
I have been impressed with how much change you can create right up to the age of 20. All right, not in every child, but if you correct posture at 16, 17, you can get big changes. When I'm talking of big, I mean forward growth as much as 25, 30 millimeters. Now that's huge compared with the size of the face.
But sorry, it gets exponentially, disproportionately more difficult as you get older.
Yes.
And it seems to be their keystone points. The age when the molars and incisors finally come in, sort of 5 and a half, 6 to 6.5. The point where the maxilla seems to stop growing anywhere from sort of 10 years old to 12 years old. And then sort of 18 to 25 years old, with 25 years old being roughly the top end of, by the time all your growth hormones and all, they've gone. You finish growing as a boy maybe a little bit at 17, 18, but you still have enough growth hormone carrying on till 25, so you've got some change in you. And then after that, well, Patrick, after that, if you had a stroke, one side of your face would drop down. That would happen right the way up to 80 years old. So is it actually the skeleton, the bones that are preventing change, or is it just you've become a creature of habit?
The muscles.
Yeah, well,
There is a difference between growth and change.
Yes, there's there is. There's a big difference. I mean, you're fully grown, most girls by 12, most boys by sort of 14, 16 in the whole body. The face generally, the head's a head. When you're born, you're more head disproportionately than you are the rest of your body. And so your head is a head, and it finishes growing before everything else, often quite a long way before everything else. But you can still gain change. And this is what these kids, these mewing kids are doing. So I came out with this, I put my ideas online. They were swallowed hook, line, and sinker by the young adolescent community. They took my exercises and they kicked it out the ballpark. I mean, it's just amazing. Because what you then get, and what I then observed, was these young men, really, mainly young men, women as well, but predominantly young men, working really hard to change how their faces grew. Now, I'd love to show, because we're talking about faces changing. We're talking about these guys with adenoidal faces. And there's something I'd like to put this in a bit more perspective. Do you mind if I share the screen for a second?
Sure, of course.
A co-host?
Now you are.
Now, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that out big on that screen. And then I'm going to go share screen. I will go share that screen there.
I must go before too long, but...
Okay, well, I've shared this screen.
Yes.
And, okay, so what I've got here is I won't go to slide view because then it gets much more complex. But you see, this is someone in the sort of prehistoric period. This is someone going back to hunter-gatherer, maybe, specifically before the medieval period, someone living a much more natural lifestyle, chewing heavy things, using these muscles, mouth closed, easily able to breathe. And then as we go into the modern world, the face starts dropping down. Okay, so you've got weak muscles from modern food. We've got blocked noses, we're hanging our mouths open. Both of those is causing the face to drop. And we get down, and this one progresses down into the classic adenoidal pattern. But it doesn't happen to have that way. We've got these classic 3 classes of malocclusion. And as faces drop down, they go to about a halfway point, and then they change into various different directions. So what we've got here is, this is someone who's dropped straight down, what we call class 1. There's someone who's dropped down with the jaw going back more. So they've tended to breathe like this. Their method of coping with this situation is to push the tongue forward and hang it out. So they tend to grow in this type of direction.
Forward head posture.
I think they all get a forward head posture because that's
Okay.
just, when your face collapses, you need to hold your head open to open the airway.
Yep.
But the last one, the class 3, these particular people tend to drop their tongue in the mandible and hold the mandible forward. And that's a really good way of coping with this situation. But it means depending on how you respond, you are going to get a different pattern of what we would expect, a different phenotypic expression is what you would call it medically. But you end up in a different place depending on how you respond to the problem.
Yes,
and that's
yes.
what slightly complicates these, these discussions. The one here being that classic adenoidal face, but everyone you're going to meet in a modern world is slightly downswung. Everyone.
Yeah.
I'm down to, I'm flat around here. My face has dropped down a little bit. Basically, everyone. The people who are least affected, they're the people adorning magazine covers and actors and people. And I don't think it's that genetically related. I mean, I think, and this is a controversial statement to make, but I think almost everyone was designed to have a really healthy face that looked aesthetically pleasing. And that is, in a way, our inheritance, and that's what, in a way, we should be getting back to. And I know that's such a controversial statement, and everyone should be happy the way they are.
So he's published several papers, and one of these papers is establishment of nasal breathing should be the ultimate goal to secure adequate craniofacial and airway development in children. Now, here you have who's considered to be one of the top founding fathers of sleep medicine, pretty much saying what you've been saying to some degree.
Yeah.
If we just look at the title, a nasal breathing should be the ultimate goal to secure adequate craniofacial. He's talking about the face, and he's talking about the development of the airway.
Yeah.
And
how it develops.
He talks about chronic mouth breathing during active craniofacial development of a child may result in anatomical changes that directly affect the airway. These changes may result in greater airway instability and collapsibility that potentially lead to other problems later in life, such as sleep disorder breathing. Prior investigations of children with mouth breathing have shown that a correlation with abnormal oral facial growth. So surely we cannot ignore what one person is considered the founding of a father of sleep medicine.
I mean, all we're asking for, Patrick, really is debate.
Yeah.
I want a debate on why teeth are crooked,
And also the bigger debate on what John was saying, that we have to be considering the face, we have to be considering the airway. And I'm going to bring it to a close because I think it has been a tremendous conversation.
We start with the cause of crooked teeth and work upwards, Patrick, to these other subjects.
I could say a lot about the actual cause of sleep apnea, but that is another subject.
And I think it's related to the cause of crooked teeth. This whole thing, we're talking about one structure. And I'm saying if you've got crooked teeth, then there's a high chance that this structure, there was something wrong with the growth of this structure. If you have crooked teeth, or you don't have enough space for all of your teeth to align naturally, then something's gone wrong with the growth of your face, and that will have other health knock-on effects.
Very true.
Yeah, so even with the phenotypes of sleep apnea, there's still a recognition that anatomical compromise is the single most common factor which is causing obstructive sleep apnea. There are other phenotypes as well, loop gain, upper airway recruitment, etc., etc.
Yeah.
There's
an interplay between all of those as well.
Yes. So, thanks so much for your time. And any parents, any people listening to this, I would love to bring some support to Dr. Mike Mew. He has had, I would say, a rough journey. I really feel for you in terms of putting this information out there. And I think ultimately the decision makers here, it should be about the parents. It's the parents and it's the parents' children. And I think for any of us as parents, we should be viewing how we are having our children treated orthodontically and with dentists,
but also
and knowing the information.
Yeah, you can break most of what we're saying to stand up straight and shut your mouth. Now there's a good start.
Okay.
Chew some gum, stand up straight, shut your mouth.
Okay. So we'll close at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Oxygen Advantage podcast. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and maybe take the time to leave us a review. The Oxygen Advantage podcast is available from all your podcast providers.